Okay, Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's take this sucker home.
All right, here we go. So you teased this a little bit earlier. Indiana football coach Curt Cignetti, never afraid to speak his mind. He talked with CBS Sports recently and had this to say about NIL. Again, this is from Curt Cignetti. Quote, the 5 or 6 out there that have unlimited NIL resources, it's kind of scary for everybody else. I think our little pot of gold is pretty nice, but we're not at 40 million or 30 million or even 25 million. I mean, if you want to be the best, you got to be able to compete against the best. Right now, I understand that is Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Texas Tech because of their oil money. I think Notre Dame's up there pretty good right now, too. Miami, of course. End quote. Those comments from Curt Cignetti are blank.
They're just not necessary. When you come out and you start taking shots like that, you just put a target on your back. And at the end of the day, he doesn't know, to be honest with you. And I don't think it's a coincidence that two of the teams that beat him ended up on that list, right? And I think Notre Dame is kind of like that afterthought where, oh, I think Notre Dame's up there because they'd have to be because they beat us, right? And so, I feel like Curt Cignetti always has ammunition or kind of excuses for maybe why he has a little bit of shortcomings at the end of the day. And just like when we were talking earlier, you slap Notre Dame's name on something and it's going to give it, more meat to it, more attention, more clicks, that sort of stuff. But the thing is Curt Cignetti has no real idea how much Notre Dame spends on NIL, and I just don't think it's in his best interest to kind of go out there and start talking about some stuff that he doesn't have all the information about.
Now, this is an interesting way to look at it from Andrew. He says he's being transparent, trying to get his boosters to donate more to NIL. Okay, I can see that perspective. I think every coach is going to try to tell you in the age that we're in that they need more NIL money. But there are a lot of different ways to look at this. First, Indiana's not going to win 11 games this year because Curt Cignetti is telling you right now that Indiana is not going to win 11 games this year because I completely agree with what Brian says. Sounds like he's already making excuses for the down year that he's going to have. And, there are a lot of different ways to look at this, but, he's pulling the Brian Kelly, giving you the excuses why he can't win in advance. And then if he does end up winning, it's like, well, see, I did it, even though I didn't have all the big NIL resources. And if he doesn't, it's like, well, now I've got to have more NIL resources, to Andrew's point, and like he hit it big with the portal last year, getting guys from James Madison and the MAC and stuff like that. But it seems like he's found out that the cost of, it costs a lot more to get Power 4 players, and he's mad about it. Now, the next way to look at this is, look, Indiana, Curt Cignetti, you're in the Big Ten, the same Big Ten that broke up the Pac-12, along with Fox and, all this money that's supposed to be coming in, how about you use some of that for NIL funds if you don't think that you've got enough money because you're getting all this TV money that's supposed to benefit you, So, go cry to your school if you want more money out of this thing. And then the third way to look at this is like the fact that he's mentioning Notre Dame is nothing but good because there's been this perception, there was really, this is even probably within the last year, like because you don't hear about, like numbers flying out of Notre Dame, exactly how much is going to who and, if, what they're spending on NIL and all that kind of stuff. There was a perception that Notre Dame wasn't willing to go all in with the NIL to compete with the big boys. But the fact is, like the fact that he's casually tossing Notre Dame's name around out there is one of the, schools that's spending big. That's just free advertising for Notre Dame, mentioning them in that breath that they are one of the top schools in NIL, and why Notre Dame might not, straight up be in the pay for play game. They're a major player in the NIL space because their AD and their coach are both all in on winning a national championship. So, like I do feel like it's some excuse making for Signetti up front, but ultimately I think it's actually good that he's mentioning Notre Dame the way he is.
No such thing as bad publicity, right?
Nope, not in this case. I don't think so. Andrew says his mentor Saban famously talked about A&M's big spend, and Signetti is imitating Saban. And yeah, I mean, Saban obviously is very anti-NIL as well. So after seeing Notre Dame and Clemson agree to a 12-year home-and-home schedule yesterday, Jesse, what is the next team you would like to see the Irish establish a new rivalry with?
Yeah, I mean, this might not land well with a lot of people, but I'm kind of digging this whole Ohio State saga that they've got going on right now. I think they've obviously had the Michigan on the schedule. They've had Penn State on the schedule. They've got Michigan State on the schedule. You got Purdue on the schedule. I think establishing this with Ohio State, both teams, at the top, or Ohio State's at the top of its game. Notre Dame's at the top of their game. They play a lot of meaningful games over the last couple of years, obviously the national championship. And so, that's how Clemson and Notre Dame started, is they started to play meaningful games. All the games were close, had high stakes, and that sort of thing. And so I like the more regional matchups, right? Like something that both fan bases can mobilize to. It's not that far from Columbus to South Bend. My mom's going to make that drive this weekend. She can tell you all about it. But yeah, I like where Ohio State and Notre Dame are right now as programs. Obviously, you would hope that Notre Dame can kind of turn the tide here a little bit and pick up some wins against Ohio State, but I don't mind Notre Dame challenging themselves against a regional opponent.
See, and that's why I would just go with Michigan. They've played 43 times, but they haven't played since 2019. Now they're going to come back on the schedule for a couple years here in the 2030s. But from 1998 to 2014, they played 16 of those 18 years. It was nearly continuous. And then it stopped for a couple years. It came back. We got the chicken dance, and, then we got rain, and it went away. There's less than 180 miles that separate South Bend and Ann Arbor. This is a great rivalry. To a lot of people, Notre Dame, Michigan, historically has been one of the greatest college football rivalries in this country. And the fact that we're not getting it, like, there's an opportunity potentially here. And if you've got that opportunity, again, like, look at what Pete Bavacqua did by signing this 12-year deal with Clemson. He knows that this is good television. Like, this is good for the TV partner. Do you think that Notre Dame, Michigan wouldn't be good for the TV partners, especially when NBC is part of the deal where they could be televising, like road Notre Dame games as well, potentially, if you had a Notre Dame and Michigan, and I know Fox is in there still as well, but Michigan's a no-brainer for me. I think that this needs to be on the schedule more regularly going forward, especially if there's an opportunity to do it. So I had sorry, go ahead.
I wouldn't mind Michigan or Ohio State, both regional opponents. Obviously, there's more tradition with Michigan, but I just want something regional, something that kind of feels like a turf war almost.
Yeah. Like David says he grew up on Notre Dame, Michigan. And I mean, like early 90s, again, they weren't playing every year, but for like late 80s, early 90s, they were playing fairly regularly. Then it went away for a good chunk of the 90s, and then it came back at the end of the 90s and was fairly continuous, for like 14 straight years, I think. Now, I had David Lake on yesterday. He covers Miami, and I asked him in that interview, and if you haven't heard the full interview, you can go to our podcast archive or YouTube or wherever you want to, and you can listen to the interview. We talked a lot about Carson Beck and some other stuff, but I asked him, since the Notre Dame Clemson deal had just been announced, what about Notre Dame Miami? Would there be an appetite from the Miami side to maybe see that come back more regularly?
It definitely would be here for that. I think, it's good for fans, and also I think ideally it brings in more revenue, right? So I think if that's the bottom line, it brings in more revenue, getting primetime, big-time matchups like a Notre Dame. I think Miami definitely would be here for that. So 100%, and I'd love to see it too.
Now, we're supposed to get more Miami and Florida State as part of this ACC deal. What do you think about Miami? Would you accept Miami as a regular going forward?
More hesitant on Miami. I think more of that tradition is kind of in the past, but, still meaningful football. But like if I had to pick between Miami or Michigan, Miami, Ohio State, Miami, Penn State, I would pick, all of those Midwest teams before I pick Miami. Don't get me wrong, it would be good games, but Miami's got to show up every year. They can't put us on the schedule and then back out like they did last year.
And that's the thing. I didn't even bring that up because, like, what's he going to say? He's just another guy in the media. Like the fact that, as I've said before, last year's game, Notre Dame, Miami, that got pushed off the schedule because Miami, scheduled Florida A&M and put too many teams on the schedule. I guarantee you, if that had been a home game last year for Miami, they wouldn't have been pushing Notre Dame off the schedule because, like he was just saying there, more revenue and all those other factors as well. I think Miami would probably be around, my number 5 option. Yeah. I'm obviously so I'm old enough to remember when that rivalry meant something, but it went away for a long time because, it's basically not a rivalry anymore because of the fact that it got so bitter and, they just decided that it wasn't worth doing it anymore. But I think that I think it's a nice possibility. It kind of, goes back to some nostalgia for people who remember some of that. Tommy saying Notre Dame is not a regional team, kind of to your point about playing teams in the region. They're not, but Notre Dame, Michigan, and Ohio State are 3 of the top national TV brands. So like the playing one of those 2 teams or even both of them, kind of on a revolving basis. I think we've talked about this before. Even if you did it where you've got a 2-year home and home with Michigan, and then you've got a 2-year home and home with Ohio State, and then you just kept rotating like that.
That's what ideally would be awesome to me.
Yeah, and then like everyone who comes through Notre Dame, Michigan, or Ohio State, you would get to play those schools at least twice in your 4 years, in school if you revolved it like that. I think that would be perfect because, again, like the proximity helps add to the rivalry, but also these are 3, like Michigan and Ohio State have won the last 2 national championships. And Notre Dame obviously just played Ohio State in the national championship game. And you would get monster TV ratings, just like you have when Notre Dame and Ohio State have played the last, couple years in the regular season. So I think that those, even though I agree, like a regional rivalry like Purdue or Indiana doesn't make sense because those are not college football brand names. But Notre Dame playing either Ohio State or Michigan regularly, I'm there for that. I'm totally there for that.
Yeah, closing thought on this. I don't know. I know you and Vince probably talked about this a lot yesterday. Don't want to go too deep. I think that this Clemson deal just shows me more and more red flags. Ohio State wants nothing to do with, USC wants nothing to do with Notre Dame anymore.
I think it's potentially a sign that could be coming. Like you're giving yourself a backup plan.
Yep.
By making sure that you've got a quality opponent, what's at least right now a quality opponent on the schedule year in and year out. I definitely agree with that. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame baseball won its 3rd straight ACC series over the weekend by taking 2 out of 3 games from Louisville. The Irish are now 26-19 overall, 12-15 in conference play with 7 games remaining before the ACC tournament. This makes you feel blank about their season.
Makes me feel rejuvenated, to be honest with you, because, at the beginning of a couple of weeks ago, we were sitting here talking about how they're losing weekday games to Western Michigan. Their offense was in the tank. Their starting pitching was in the tank. They just really didn't have a lot kind of going on for them, and they were showing no signs of progression, and this is year 3 for this head coach, and so you had to make some progression. We wanted them to make the tournament this year if they can be on that bubble and maybe be one of the first, 4 in or out. I would be more comfortable with that. But I feel rejuvenated because I felt like we were on this slope and they kind of got to the bottom and something kind of kicked in and now we're kind of trending more upwards. So feeling a lot better about it. There's still a lot of work to do, unfortunately, but I feel rejuvenated in the fact that they're just not a bad team anymore.
I mean, they're showing signs of life, and that's what you want. And, look, wins are wins, as the first part of this season, and especially playing in the ACC where there's a lot of quality, ranked teams, like the ability to at least take one game from Florida State, in one game in some of those series, like that's turned out to be fairly crucial. Obviously, the goal is just win series. Now look, you do have to take some of this with a grain of salt, and I'm not knocking them because, again, wins are wins, but Cal and Stanford this year are two of the worst teams in the ACC, and that's where, like this streak started by sweeping both of those teams. Now, even though they're at the bottom of the conference, again, as Florida State, who's sitting at the top of the conference right now, can attest, well, Notre Dame took a game from them earlier in the season. So, like just because you're a bad team or just because you're playing a bad team, it's not a given that you're going to get a sweep. Anybody can take a game away from you now and then. So they at least did get the sweep. They played themselves back into contention. Louisville, a legit team. They were ranked number 17 in the nation last weekend when Notre Dame kind of shocked them, to be quite honest, and took 2 out of 3 games away from them. But the bottom line for me is, I said at the start of the season, the minimal requirement for progress to be shown for Sean Stifler in year 3 is to at least be on the NCAA tournament bubble. And they're on the bubble right now. I saw a projection earlier this week that has them in the first 4 out. So, like, they're still out of the tournament, but they are squarely on the bubble with an opportunity maybe to get in. Like, here's the big thing for them right now. They've got a 3-game non-conference series coming up against Bowling Green because they've got finals, and then, they've got their conference bye weekend. So, like, that's not going to do anything for their RPI. But then they've got 1 game against Eastern Michigan that's been rained out like a million times this season. And then they close the regular season at Miami before the ACC tournament. So, like, personally, for them to have a chance, like a legitimate chance to make it into the tournament field, I feel like they've probably got to win 7 of these last 8 games with, like one, the only loss can probably come in the Miami series, but they still need to win that series. And then I think that they probably need to win at least 3 games in the ACC tournament as well. Like right now, they're the number 11 seed. So if you win 3 games, you would get to the semifinals. I think that that's probably what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to stay extremely hot here down the stretch.
Agreed.
But we can at least feel better about where they are right now with an opportunity. It's more than you would have said 3 weeks ago. So Abdul Carter, the New York Giants rookie, just can't seem to get a jersey number. First, he wanted Lawrence Taylor's number 56, but that number is retired, and Taylor wouldn't let him have it. And so Carter was then going to try for number 11 that he wore at Penn State, but Phil Simms said no because that number is also retired. So, a few questions here about jersey numbers, retired, and everything else. Is it a tribute or is it disrespectful to request a retired jersey number?
I think it's pretty disrespectful at the end of the day. Basically, what you're saying is you believe you are good enough without playing an NFL snap to unretire a number. So I think it's disrespectful. A lot of what I feel about this topic will probably come in the last question of this. And so I'm trying not to give myself away.
You're spacing it out because I've got multiple questions that's coming with this. So I think it's disrespectful as well. I think, like, if it's a number that you wore in college and you get drafted by the team and you want that number, and I think if the guy whose number, like if Phil Simms had come to Abdul Carter and said, take this jersey, like wear number 11, wear it proudly. I played offense. You're a defensive player, 2 different sides of the ball. Go for it. I think that would be one thing. But like you're asking LT to wear his number 56.
I mean, you haven't done a snap, and look at what he did in his whole career.
LT is like the first truly great outside linebacker edge rushers. Like there is like LT, Lawrence Taylor is one of one. And like you're asking Lawrence Taylor for his jersey number. Sorry. I can't
Who do you
go
think
for that.
You are?
That's right. Is there a number you consider the most untouchable?
Like just number in general or like position number?
I don't know.
I don't think that there's like a most untouchable number. I think though, if you had to look at like, I think that quarterbacks is like the most untouchable number, basically. Like whatever a really good quarterback wore, I think are the most untouchable numbers.
That makes sense because I mean, it kind of depends on the team and the sport. As I started thinking about this, like Babe Ruth wore number 3. Like that's obviously it's Babe Ruth.
Maybe
It's pretty,
42 because of Jackie Robinson.
42 Jackie Robinson, 23 in basketball. If you're a Chicago Bull, like nobody needs to be messing with that. So I think it's pretty team dependent. Like as Andrew says, and as you said, Jackie Robinson in baseball, if they're going to retire one number across the sport, obviously that probably does become the most untouchable number that there is, number 42, when you think about it. Okay. So do you think that it's time to stop retiring numbers?
Let me cook here. I do think it is time to stop retiring numbers. And I'm not just saying this because it's my Dallas Cowboys, but I love what they do with the number 88. They don't retire it. They make it a legacy. They make it an honor to wear the number. Right. I think more teams should adopt that type system. If you feel strongly about a player and you believe that they are continuing a legacy, then you make a legacy number. It's the same thing. Instead of retiring it, you just make it a legacy number, and you only allow a select group of players to continue and wear that number. So I'm sorry that the Cowboys do it, but that's how I think it should go. And I love that they do that with 88.
Absolutely. And, I think that is a much better way to do it. You honor the tradition, like if you are, if you're Abdul Carter and you were picked where you were picked and 56 was still available, you give him 56 right away because you're honoring the legacy of Lawrence Taylor in that case. I think it's, there are only so many numbers. The Celtics have retired the most numbers of any sport of any professional sport. 22 numbers they have retired, which seems unbelievable. The Bears have retired 14, but there are only so many numbers to go around. Like, could you imagine if Notre Dame started retiring numbers? Like, what would you do? What would you do? Like, because there have been so many greats who have come through Notre Dame. Like, you would limit even more, who can wear what number. Just put them in the Ring of Honor, like do the ceremony for them, raise the banner for them, whatever sport that it happens to be, and honor that number, but don't actually retire the number. Just make sure that it is there, the number and the name, for everybody to see, just like when you go inside Purcell Pavilion and you see all those names and numbers, that are hanging up there in the rafters, and do it that way. And like you said, I think that that's actually one of the best things that the Cowboys do is, like Jalen Smith got to wear Chuck Howley's number 54 when he came into the NFL. Chuck Howley, still the only losing player in a Super Bowl to be named Super Bowl MVP, like one of the original greats, and like Bob Lilly as well coming through, so like I think that you make a mistake by retiring these numbers, because then you get yourself into these situations.
Yes.
Honor the players instead. I think it's a much better way to go. So Tommy said, but literally every single player wears 42 one day through the season. But they won't let anybody else wear it for the rest of the season. But that's part of honoring the legacy of Jackie Robinson by having everybody wear it.
He's just being a smarty pants.
Yeah, I know. Pat said he posted last week on IB that his dad was in the hospital. Very scary. He's back at home and now doing okay. And he wants to thank everybody for your prayers. Glad to hear that, Pat. And hopefully is on the rapid road to recovery. Glad to hear that, and appreciate the update on that. So there's a baseball play from the other night that's generating a bit of discussion. Atlanta's Matt Olson drove a ball down the left field line, and Cincinnati outfielder Tyler Callahan injured his arm crashing into the wall trying to make the catch. Olson raced around the bases and scored while Callahan lay injured after the ball rolled away from him. Fair or foul for Olson to score after Callahan was injured on the play?
This was fair, and even I will stand on this as much as possible. There's multiple factors into this. One, I thought he caught it. First of all, second of all, if it's on the umpire to stop play and basically call it a ground rule double. Three, I think it's fair because he injured his non-throwing forearm. Just pick up the ball and throw the ball in. Like if the umpires don't stop it and they don't call a catch, what's Matt Olson supposed to do? Is he just supposed to just stop because the guy is injured? It's just, unfortunately, injuries happen. And again, he injured his non-throwing forearm. Just pick up the ball and get it in and then lay there and suffer in your pain or whatever. But, this reminded me back to, again, another high school days where we had a kid rounding third and he blew out his leg or did something. And he could have crawled to home plate, but he just laid there. It's like, to me, I get it, you're hurt, but man, just show some of that competitive spirit. Like you're gonna come out,
It's
like
funny. It's funny you brought that up. It's funny you brought that up because first of all, this is not like select to baseball. Like it's not just baseball. In every sport, this happens. They don't stop a play once the ball is snapped. In football, if a guy gets hurt, the play still goes on. In basketball, a guy falls down in backcourt in the middle of a fast break. They wait until the resolution at the other end, and then they stop to come check on the injured guy. And it's the same as baseball. Once the ball is in play, you don't stop for injury. The play has to continue. Like that play you're talking about, I was thinking about that, when people started complaining about this as well. We had a pinch runner at first base in a sectional game. He was in the game. He was literally on the team. We moved him up to varsity because he's a little jackrabbit, specifically because of his speed. So we get a ball in the gap, 2 outs. He's coming around third, and he turns his ankle, and he falls down over, coming around third base. I think it would have tied the score at that point.
It would have. Ball was smoked. He could have crawled to home plate.
Yes, he could have crawled to home plate, or just crawled the 8 feet back to third base and lay on the bag, and he would have been safe there at third base. But he did neither. And so in the meantime, I'm standing over him, and if, as the third base coach, if I touch him in any way, he is out right away. So I can do nothing. And I'm like, can you crawl to the base? Are you okay? Can you crawl to the base? And he just laid there. And it was it felt like forever while he was laying there. But, finally they threw the ball in, they tagged him out laying there. And then at that point we could help him off the field. But it was very frustrating that happened. You were there as well. That's right. DK says we're ruthless. That poor kid. Guess what? The next day he was walking around fine. It was more his pride was hurt than his actual ankle.
I've just always been, granted it's different for everyone, but my natural instinct is to finish the play and not just kind of lay there. So
right.
Let's save this last one for tomorrow because I think it can get pretty lengthy.
All right. I think so as well. Jesse's got to get going. Now that we've ripped on every kid, playing Little League through high school. So, all right. Thanks for the questions tonight. As always, in the mailbag show, We In, We Out is coming up tomorrow. So you'll have a chance to submit more questions there. Michael says, get the bubble wrap. All right. Hit the like button before you leave. We do appreciate it. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.